Alright, today we'll be talking about midpoint and distance in the coordinate plane. Okay, so the distance, that's pretty simple English. Distance is just the amount of space between two objects. Okay, so it's the amount of space between two objects. Now, if we were looking at a number line, to create the arrow. Okay, if you were picking 2 points, like let's say C and D, okay, you would represent that as this little doohickey, so CD. So the distance between CD is equal to the absolute value of C minus D. So you just take the 2 points and you subtract them. Okay, so you could subtract them in any order you want. You could go D minus C. You would still get the same distance. Okay. All right. Endpoint. It's just the end of a segment. Okay. Now that's important because, well, not important that I define it, but it's important because in midpoint formulas on the test, you guys might be having to find the endpoint coordinate rather than the midpoint. Okay, so the middle of a segment is just going to be called the midpoint. It just means the two halves are equal. So in other words, if I have a segment right here and it is A, comma E, okay, and then I picked, now not arbitrarily, but let's say I knew that the midpoint was B, okay, then AB would equal BE, okay. Alright, in segment, we've already got that down, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so the midpoint, okay, so distance is you just subtract the two on a number line. If you wanted to find the midpoint, the formula would be A plus E, and then you would divide that, let's use it black, there we go, and then you would divide that by 2, and that would give you the coordinates of B. Okay. Alright, so that gets you that actual working around distance. Okay, now, oops, jeez, that's the next lesson for people. Okay, now if we had to do it in a coordinate plane, there are two different formulas to go with midpoint and distance. Okay. Alright, so let's say we had two objects or 2 points and they're this far apart. Well, we just can't use a regular counting method of just using the X and Y axis. So we've got the Y axis, we've got the X axis right here, and we want to find the distance and midpoint of this. So let's say this was F and G. Okay. So the distance, and let's give these actual coordinates. Let's give this one, let's go 3, 5, and this one right here is going to be -7, -2. Okay. Alright, so how do we find the distance between F and G this way? Alright, over here, the distance we would just subtract them if it was just on a line. But here, it's in a two-dimensional space, so we have to treat it differently. So distance formula is the square root of the first X coordinate. You go to the change in X's, and you square that, and let me put an extra parentheses in the front. Okay, change in X is squared, and then you add that change in y's squared. Okay, and when you do change, you have to subtract. Okay, so that's the distance formula, how you work with this. So in this case, it's going to be the square root of 3 minus negative 7. And we're going to square that. We're going to add that with 5 minus negative 2. Okay, and so now you have the square root of 3 minus negative 7 becomes 10, so that's 100. And then 5 minus negative 2 is 7, so square that and we get 49. Okay, and so therefore the distance of this is going to be the square root of 149. Okay, so that's the entire distance. So square root, or is what we call in math, root 149. You know, you can give me the decimal if you'd like. I just prefer the actual length written out in root form, but you know, it's up to you. Okay, now that one is the harder one, but it does help out that you understand that you're just subtracting the two and just working with it. Now, whenever you square these two numbers, and let me just give you forewarning right now, you better be getting positive numbers, because it's always going to be positive, because whenever you square a negative or a positive, you're going to get a positive regardless. Okay, now if I wanted to do the midpoint, all right, the midpoint, that is equal, and this one's going to be a little bit trickier because it has to go a little bit bigger. Sum of x's. Okay, so you're going to add up the x's and you're going to divide by 2. And this is going to be comma. Sum of y's, and you're going to divide by 2. Okay, so the sum of the x's, so you're going to actually add these up, so it's going to be 3 plus negative 7. So it's going to be 3 plus negative 7, and you're going to divide by 2. Okay, comma, and then you're going to add up the y's, so it's going to be 5 plus negative 2 divided by 2. Okay, so 3 plus negative 7 is negative 4, divided by 2, it's negative 2. And 5 plus negative 2 is negative 3, or positive 3, and divide that by 2, and we get 1.5. Okay. If you take a look at that, that's roughly right here. Okay, which does seem to match. Now that would mean that these two would be equidistant. Okay, so whatever these two measurements are, they would be equidistant. Okay, now you have to be careful if you had to find the endpoint. So if they had, we will talk about that more on the next. Well, no, let's just talk about it right now. Okay, let's say you have an endpoint. So let's say you have an endpoint is 9, 1, and a midpoint is 1, 2. Okay, the question is going to ask you for the other endpoint. So do not do the midpoint formula with this. You're going to have to use the midpoint formula to get the other endpoint. So when you plug it in, okay, you're going to have 9 plus some x okay, and then you're going to divide that by 2, and we put a comma here, and 1 plus some y. So I'm using the endpoint given to me in the formula. I'm not using the other the midpoint in it because that's going to be the answer to what this should have been. So this should be equal to parentheses 1 comma 2. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have this set up, I'm going to set these two equal to each other and these two equal to each other. Sorry, the 2, and this one's going to be equal to the 1. Okay, and so what I have is 9 plus x in parentheses divided by 2 equals 1. And I have 1 plus y in parentheses divided by 2 is equal to 2. Okay, and all I have to do is solve these two equations, I get my answer. So I'm going to times both sides by 2 here, and I get 9 plus x equals 2. And so I minus 9 from both sides, and I get x to be -7. Okay, I times both sides by 2 here, and I get 1 plus y equals 2, or sorry, 4. Okay, and then I minus 1, and I get y equals 3. Okay, so the other endpoint, or to my answer, would be -7, 3. All right, and if you kind of take a look at it, the distance between, and you can check out the distance between them. The distance between 9 and 1 is 8. The distance between 1 and -7 is 8 as well. The distance between 1 and 2 is 1. The distance between 2 and 3 is 1, so that checks out. And that's how I usually check my work when I'm working with this stuff. But you do have to set it up this way, and then you have to do 2 separate equations to get the other endpoint. Okay? Alright, but midpoint and distance, they seem really hard at first, but if you practice this one quite a bit, it becomes a lot easier. Alright, thank you guys. Have a great day.